It's back. After years of suffering and extreme seller's remorse, I fixed my grievous error and I bought another obstructures. This is 0750C, serial number 67 from the 2021 run of these guitars. I couldn't help myself when Matt announced the build slots were open. I moved heaven and earth to get one back because I made a terrible mistake in selling the other one that I did the video on, which has the misfortune of being the only video there is, really, at least on YouTube, of these weirdo guitars. And I didn't put much effort into it, and I didn't actually talk about them in any meaningful way. So I'm hoping to fix that with this one. And like better performances and everything as well, so actually show the guitar off and do it justice. So, that's the goal here. That guitar was a 2017 version, and it differs in a few ways, so it's nice to be able to make that comparison having owned both of them. But I can't do a direct comparison because I sold it. I'm an idiot. So I sold it to a friend's brother, and when I realised what I'd done, I couldn't get it back. So here we are with a new one. But in a roundabout way, selling that to buy a Music Man, and then selling the Music Man to buy a ESP, and then selling the ESP to buy that, was the best choice that I've made in a long time. So, swings and roundabouts. But the gaping chasm of regret had opened inside my soul, and I needed to fill it with another idiosyncratic aluminium guitar. So, anyway, that's my story, but let's talk about the guitars, for God's sake. Obstructures, this is an 0750C, as I said before. Obstructures are a design collaborative. That's the easiest way to think about them. And amongst the three of them, Matt Hall, Brian Johnston, who has the misfortune of being named the same as the AC/DC guy, so looking him up is challenging to find out, his peer review stuff and professorial work. And Nate Madison, the three of them are obstructures, and amongst them, they're typographers, web designers, brutalists, aesthetes, architects, tool makers, problem solvers, essentially. And the best way to begin looking at these instruments that they've made is as an instrument in the literal sense. It's like a set square or a drawing triangle or a wallet or a hammer or a clipboard or a pry tool or something. It's designed for a specific purpose with as minimal points of failure and design problems as can be dealt with. Did that make sense? As few points of failure as possible. You design them all away and you end up with a guitar like this that's made just for you to do a very specific angular thing. And Matt and Nate, and Brian too, I suppose. I can't find any evidence of Brian having played in a band per se. Recorded evidence anyway, but they've been collaborating in various ways for 20 plus years. Starting out as students, starting out as musicians and machinists, and progressing all the way into their current academic life and professorial work and architecture. They've been working together on these things. So these guitars are old, despite only being 70 of them or something in the world. They've been working on them iteratively for 20 plus years. And the first ones to play them were Matt and Nate themselves. Matt's band New Brutalism. Sound like that, and there are the instruments. The near enough earliest versions of the instruments are right there on the cover of Actual Record, which is a fantastic name. And that Bandcamp also houses like a collection of music that they've made throughout the last 20, 30 years, including Nate's bands. There's a little graphic attached to Brutalism that has sort of the diagram explaining who was in what and what they did and when. So that's where these come from, essentially, is they form bands trying to play sort of angular, Albini-esque, shellacky, electrical audio, Jesus Lizard, noise rock, 90s noise rock. And when you do that, you discover that the bands that you like use Travis Bean guitars for some reason.
If I could talk,
The reason being, of course, is they have a very crisp and articulate sound coming from both the performance aspect of things and the people playing them, but the actual design of the instruments, with an aluminium neck and wooden fingerboard and a wooden body, and then the neck being set in the body in a specific way and having the pickups and the bridge mounted to the neck billet and various other things like that give you this very unique sounding guitar. And when you pick those up and you start to play them yourself, you identify the strengths but also the weaknesses. So like the wooden body is the weakest link in the chain, essentially, because if you are particularly violent on stage or in your playing style, or you use like copper picks or something, you take chunks out of the body when you play, like Bob and Steve do. There's pictures of Bob's bass that look like it's been attacked with like a chisel or something. And if you are particularly aggressive on stage and smash your guitar into stuff, you end up with smashed bodies with the neck surviving. And there's different temperature sensitivities and humidity sensitivities between aluminium, which is impervious to humidity, but reacts differently to temperature, than the body, which is susceptible to humidity and reactive to temperature in different ways again. So you notice these things from a design perspective and you try to fix them. And that's where you end up with a guitar like this, where you build everything out of aluminium and you try and do away with all of the points of failure that you found in your instruments to make them as indestructible as possible. I say that because there's photographs of these guitars, or at least one of them, somehow being smashed apart. There's at least one guitar, one of the early ABC guitars, that has the whole side wing just smashed off and welded back on again. And there's all these photographs from that time of experimenting with their durability, of lighting them on fire and driving over them with trucks. It's great, all great stuff. I love looking at all those old photographs. And that's what sucked me into buying one of these in the first place. Is I'd never seen one, I'd never played one, never had the opportunity to do that. Very few musicians are actually using them for recorded music. People own them, but it's hard to find confirmed usage. So yeah, ABC guitars 20-something years ago, fast forward iteratively over 20 years to get this. And that's the short version. So, specs. This is 0750C, as I've said before, but the significance of that name is it's 0.75 inches thick. And that's the answer to a design question, essentially, of we're going to build these things out of solid aluminium and machine them. How thin can they be to keep the weight down? Because solid aluminium, as you may be aware, is quite heavy. This is a 6-kilo guitar as it is. And if you want to weight relieve it or do other stuff to chamber it, that's machining step and complexity. Trying to avoid that, you want to go simple, just make it as thin as possible. And that's the limit. 0.725 inches is the thickness of the output, essentially. So that's as thin as you can go. And the neck is the same. It's 19 mils because it's the same thickness as the body, essentially, with a carve. And that's sort of like a Gibson style rounded C. Not quite a D, but it's quite a wide C. And these are all, like, there's little bits of hangover from Travis Bean and Gibson style instruments. So the scale length is 24 3/4. It's got 22 frets. It's got P90s in, which are made by EGC. Logical choice, because Kevin is the only authorized person by the estate of Travis Bean to build Travis Bean designs in the modern world. So the pickups make sense. Put Kevin's pickups in to get it as close to the spec that you want for your music as possible, to replace your Travis Bean guitars that you are destroying. It's got no fingerboard radius, dead flat, because that takes out a machining step. You don't have to machine in the curvature of the fingerboard, because you can't just get a sanding block and sand it in like you do with wood. You've got to program the precise radius into the fingerboard. So get rid of that, one less machining step. And in a similar way, the thing is completely symmetrical. So it's one template, one guitar for both left and right-handed musicians, for both orientations. And the controls are completely centered. And there's 2 outputs, one either side of the strap pin. So you've got 2 volumes, a 3-way on and on mini switch, and then the pickups, and everything just sort of goes down the center line. The control cavity is also your other limitation, which I'm somehow working out the screw of, so I'll have to fix that. But you can't have big switches or big pots or any fancy electrics, because you've got the thickness of, 0.725 inches is as much room as you've got in the cavity. So you've got to be really judicious about how you wire it. We got nickel frets, Graphtec nut and saddles, and that's to address a point of failure of when you smash the hell out of your guitar. You break strings by doing that, especially when you're using metal picks. So try to reduce that as much as possible by using synthetic self-lubricating materials, and you address the string break angle inside the body of the guitar with relieving to sort of strain relieve this path of the strings through the neck. And then the last thing you might have noticed is that the tuners are in a weird place. And this is a design solution also, because a machining step, another one, is required if you want to put a headstock tilt in or a neck tilt. To do away with it, make a flat headstock and rotate the orientation of the tuners so that you tune this way and the strings rotate around the post and provide their own tension past the nut. There's a difference between this one and the old guitar as well, which is a minute one that I noticed straight away, is that they've included sort of like pilot holes for if you want to rotate the tuners around to the conventional way and have them face backwards at least. But previous guitars, you were sort of locked into having them face upwards like this. So I'm used to seeing it like this, but I might, after this video, flip them around the other way and see what the user experience is like. And the case. The final sort of design challenge is, what case do you put it in? Well, you make a case that is just thick enough to fit the guitar in. And they've modified this for the new version as well, so that when you flip the tuners around, it will still fit in the case. But it just barely fits. Like, that's the minimum effective case. Because the strap that I'm wearing on this guitar does not fit in the case with the guitar. That's how reductive everything is. It's as minimal as you can go. I just did a very poor job explaining Brutalism, so I'm cutting it out because I don't want to embarrass myself to the design community. But go look up Obstructures' Instagram page and Matt's personal stuff on Super Unison Works, and Leverance for a start, and look at the designs and look at the aesthetic, and it'll make sense. It's like it's only the necessary. So it's like the same, it's function over form in lots of ways. Or like form as a consequence of function. That's probably the easiest way to think about it. Well, that's the way I think about it, rightly or wrongly. And so that's what this guitar is to me. It's function over form, and form as consequence to function. Like, this looks as beautiful as it is because it was designed to be a functional tool. And it's part of its beauty. So anyway, that's the guitar. You could argue that the most superfluous feature on it is the player. No, the the neck pickup, because you only really need one, or like the bridge pickup, you only really need one pickup. Having the option of 3 tones, you don't need that. It just needs to go on and through the amp, right? But nonetheless, I'm glad it has 2, because the middle position is my favorite part of it. I'm not going to bother jamming out here because I've played it better in other clips, but it's really just a stunning reactive guitar in the real sense. Like, I've described other aluminium instruments as angry tuning forks because they are, but this particularly, it's almost literally a tuning fork. I found almost straight away after I picked it up that this one resonates on an A flat, particularly like the octave of the A flat. When I play that note, the whole guitar, there's not really a way for me to show it on a camera or anything, but the whole guitar goes, like, it engages itself like a tuning fork, which the other one didn't do, at least not on a pitch that was common. Like, this is how I tune my guitars, this is a semitone down. So it was a nice little find. But it basically just plays itself. Like, I'm not using a compressor or anything. This is the sound of the guitar through the neck pickup. And when you play quietly on these guitars, you don't lose bottom end. It just gets quieter. Like, and you can play them conventionally, and they sound perfectly fine. Now, you can do that. Anyway, you get the point. I was getting lost in Chick Corea for a second. You can play them like that. They're not a shredder, because, I mean, they're not really... They don't want you to play them that way. But you can do it. And here's more evidence of that if you want. What they actually want as instruments, they sort of compel you to play in this sort of unpretentious, I don't give a fuck way. Especially when you combine it with, I don't know if you can see it, but this is an overdrive pedal that they've collaborated with Electronic Audio Experiments on, which is basically just a boost. And it's like if you put your obstructures into another obstructures, like if they made a knife that was actually a guitar pedal, that's what this sounds like. Just brutal. Like, it wants that. And then when you use the neck pickup, you get this like... There's going to be lots more cuts in this video than I wanted, I think, because I just keep getting carried away by playing the guitar. It's just, it makes you play a certain way, this instrument, which is the mark of a good tool, I think, is it inspires you, but also it doesn't, you're not really conscious of it while it's happening, necessarily. It sort of gets out of your way and you're just creating with it, which is exactly what you want. It's the dream, is like this thing that just becomes part of you, part of your arm, like a tennis racket. You're not conscious of hitting the ball with a racket, you just hit the ball. It becomes part of your arm, the length of your arm. It's the same as this. This becomes the tool with which you're making music, and it becomes part of you. It's very pretentious, but it is actually what's happening. And because of that, like the weight of this on my shoulders, and the narrow nut, and the neck shape, and the no fingerboard radius, and the sharp sounding pickups, and the thin body, and the whole lot, it generated ideas that I hadn't previously experienced, even though they're, you know, in a similar situation. Like, we were trying to write a new Dumb Saint record when I got the original guitar, and I basically just swapped over to writing everything on this guitar because I liked what was happening. So I discovered that it sounded good for this sort of, you know, jangly sort of sound. So I wanted to keep doing that. And write more music with it. But while doing that, and trying to find the new horizon of like what's the stuff that really nothing else can do, I discovered lazily, while trying to like get a super dropped tuned guitar without picking up another guitar, I discovered if I put these strings in an octave pair, kind of like how Torch might do it, you end up with this apocalyptic sound when you add distortions. Especially in the neck pickup, you get this like... hook it to my veins. Anyway, I'm sorry I've wasted so much of your time with my rambling, but I hope this has shed a bit of light on why this guitar, why are these things, and I hope if you get the opportunity to buy one or play one, you take either of those opportunities. If you buy one, never sell it. If you get the opportunity to play one, don't sleep on it. Go and play the guitar. See how it feels for you, and you'll probably just get hooked in, like I did, to having to own one at all times. Here's another thing where I play a bit more conventionally, trying to be a bit more dynamic with the instrument and do it justice. I'll just stick it at the end. So, thanks for watching.